In this video, I'm going to explore a range of responses to the question about how Stevenson creates mystery and tension in Jekyll and Hyde, which appeared in the AQA June 2018 English Literature series. If you're studying Jekyll and Hyde with OCR or Edexcel, this video will still be helpful as the questions have pretty much the same structure, where you are invited to first consider how something is presented in an extract and then how it is presented in the novel as a whole. The exam paper, including the extract, can be downloaded from the AQA website at the following address, and I have provided a link in the description section under the video. In the AQA paper, the question is as follows. Starting with this extract, explore how Stevenson creates mystery and tension in the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Write about how Stevenson creates mystery and tension in this extract, how Stevenson creates mystery and tension in the novel as a whole, 30 marks. Please note that this is not going to be an exhaustive answer, nor is it going to be an exemplar. These are just some ideas for you to consider incorporating into your own responses by adding to what you've already covered in class. So first of all, Stevenson creates mystery and tension in this extract through his very vivid description of a fog-smothered Soho, which during Victorian times was a densely populated area of London, where disease and crime were rife amongst the overcrowded tenements, music halls and drinking dens. The great chocolate-coloured pall, or polluted smog, which Utterson drives through to get to Hyde's quarters, dominates the extract and creates an oppressive and tense atmosphere. The use of the simile, a glow of a rich lurid brown like the light of some strange conflagration, creates a hellish vision which Utterson perceives as being like some city in a nightmare. Nightmares, taken from the Gothic tradition and used as a means of foreshadowing, are a recurring motif in the novel. Utterson dreams of Hyde. Even in his dreams, it, or Hyde, had no face, or one that baffled him and melted before his eyes. Stevenson makes use of nightmares to highlight the way in which Hyde's evil influence, even before he has even set eyes upon him, has the power to shake Utterson's usually stolid and unimaginative character to the core, and to depict his emotions in a more dramatic and frightening manner, thus creating an atmosphere of mystery and tension. Because it shuts out the light from the sun, apart from the odd, haggard shaft of daylight, the fog creates an artificial twilight which has a number of degrees and hues like the back end of evening. Stevenson also uses this motif in the incident at the window, where a premature twilight has settled over the court at the rear of Jekyll's property. In both incidents, twilight is used to suggest darkness as an unnatural stain on the light, as a symbol of Hyde as an evil stain on Dr. Jekyll, who, in contrast, is the very pink of proprieties. Not only does the fog literally obscure vision to create a disorientating picture of reality, however, where its swirling wreaths cause changing glimpses of Utterson's surroundings, it is also a metaphor for the mystery which shrouds and envelops Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde for much of the novel. Most of the key scenes, in fact, in line with the Gothic tradition from which the novel comes, take place at night, in darkness, or in fog. When the fog eventually lifts a little in the extract, it is only to enumerate the unpleasant elements of their surroundings, such as a dingy street and a gin palace, as well as the people who inhabit it, the many ragged children huddled in doorways, and the women leaving their homes for a morning glass of gin. The dirt, the poverty, and the references to alcohol and penny numbers, or cheap, trashy newspapers which entertained their readers with tales of murderers and executions of highwaymen, would have created tension, as Victorian readers would associate all these elements with criminality and degeneracy. Stevenson's choice of location for Hyde's quarters clearly demonstrates to his readers Hyde's affinity for everything that is dark and immoral about the human condition. The theme of doubling is found throughout the text to create mystery and tension. London is depicted as a city of two halves, where the handsome houses of Cavendish Square, that citadel of medicine, sit cheek by jowl with the slums of Soho, frequented by Mr. Hyde, as described in the extract. This is nowhere more evident than in the description of the street at the beginning of the novel, where the rear entrance to Jekyll's laboratory is to be found. The door is blistered and distained. It is a stain on an otherwise very pleasant street, which has freshly painted shutters, well-polished brasses, and general cleanliness and gaiety of note. Not only is it so obviously out of place that it causes mystery, but also Stevenson, using Victorian protocols for not gossiping to his advantage, does not allow Enfield to disclose who the name was on the cheque, and Mr. Utterson to, in turn, disclose that he knows very well who the house belongs to anyway, in order to sustain the mystery a little longer. It is only later, when we find out that the same building has an elegant facade on another square, the door of which wore a great air of wealth and comfort, that we realise that Jekyll's house is actually a physical manifestation of his double nature. This would have been particularly shocking for Stevenson's Victorian readership, as Cesare Lombroso's theory of atavism was closely linked to anxieties about criminality and class. The criminal class was peopled by evolutionary throwbacks. Blurring the established boundaries between these degenerates, embodied by Mr. Hyde, and the respectable professional class, embodied by Dr. Jekyll, would have caused unbearable tension and anxiety in the Victorian reader. Indeed, it is the shocking realisation that criminals are not confined to the slums, and that evil can exist within everyone, even himself, that brings about the premature death of Dr. Lanyon. Elsewhere in the novel, Stevenson uses elements of Gothic literature to create mystery and tension. The novel's preoccupation with monstrosity is apparent in Stevenson's descriptions of Hyde's atavistic appearance and behaviour, although when Enfield and Utterson try to describe him, they cannot seem to put their finger on what it is about him exactly that is so monstrous. Enfield describes him as an extraordinary-looking man, and yet I really can name nothing out of the way. Equally, Utterson struggles to explain the hitherto unknown disgust, loathing and fear with which he regards Hyde. Hyde's background or lack of it also creates mystery. He seems to know no one. For example, Jekyll's servants see very little of him, and his family could nowhere be traced. And there are no photographs of him to aid the police in the manhunt. His behaviour also causes tension and mystery because he is a constant threat to his arbitrarily chosen victims. He is described as having a great flame of anger, which shows how his destructive and unpredictable nature can so easily flare out of control. He tramples calmly over the little girl, the epitome of purity and innocence, purely because she is in his way, and there seems to have been little other motive for his sadistic attack on Sir Danvers Carew, other than that the old man seems to exude, or give off, such an innocent and old-world kindness that it triggers a violent reaction in the evil Hyde. Further mystery is created, therefore, with a seemingly inexplicable relationship between Jekyll and Hyde. Utterson strives to see a reason for his friend's strange preference or bondage. What is the attraction that the upstanding Jekyll has for the degenerate Hyde, and/or the hold that scheming Hyde has over the unfortunate Jekyll? Stevenson also experiments with an unconventional narrative structure to create mystery and tension in what is essentially a detective story. The story is told through a series of conversations, letters and reports of incidents as they come to the attention of the detective, Mr. Utterson, who casts himself in this role when he says, "If he be Mr. Hyde, I'll be Mr. Seek." This lack of an omniscient narrator to tell the story in a chronological and continuous fashion creates mystery. The elliptical nature of the narrative, where the story jumps 12 months between the chapter Dr. Jekyll was quite at ease and the chapter The Carew Murder Case, means that the reader is left wondering what Hyde has been up to in this time, as his violent behaviour has clearly escalated. Stevenson also needs to have the events written out of chronological order for the mystery to work. Dr. Lanyon's letter and Henry Jekyll's narrative are the denouement, or the final part where everything is explained or resolved. We need to read Dr. Lanyon's narrative after the death of Jekyll or Hyde, so that the incident regarding his own death is all the more shocking and mysterious. The reader is left on tenterhooks as a man described as a hearty, healthy, dapper, red-faced gentleman should suddenly have his death warrant written legibly upon his face, and then be dead within a fortnight. What could be so awful that it has such a drastic effect on such a seemingly healthy man? Tantalisingly, Utterson has the answer in his hands in the form of the package that arrives from Dr. Lanyon, but professional honour and faith to his dead friend were stringent obligations. He obeys Lanyon's instructions and the package remains unopened until Jekyll's disappearance. Stevenson uses Utterson's integrity as a means of keeping the reader in suspense for a while longer. In The Last Night, Stevenson teases the reader with a nod to the locked room mystery subgenre as they wonder where Jekyll could possibly have gone, as he is nowhere to be found on the premises, and the key to the rear door is found broken on the floor, the fractures of which are rusty, implying that it has not been used in a long time. This mystery is only cleared up during Lanyon's shock revelation at the end of Dr. Lanyon's narrative and Henry Jekyll's full statement, which explains how and why the evil Hyde came into existence and where Jekyll has disappeared to, although the abrupt ending, without the resumption of Utterson's narrative to tie up all the loose ends and give the reader a sense of closure, leaves the reader feeling unsettled. In conclusion, Stevenson uses a number of motifs and plot devices relating to Gothic literature and detective fiction in the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which would have resonated with Victorian social and class anxieties to create mystery and tension. Thanks for watching. I'd really appreciate any questions or comments below. I look forward to hearing from you.